Okay, imagine this scenario. You're in a team meeting, right? And your colleague, let's call her Debbie, she's really quiet, brow furrowed, hardly any eye contact. What's your first thought? Probably something like, oh, she's upset, maybe about the project. Or, something personal. We've all done that. We feel like we just know what someone else is feeling.
Right.
But what if you're totally wrong? That simple scenario, it actually gets at a really big idea we're exploring today. This common belief we have that we're pretty good at reading emotions, especially at work. Well, it seems it's largely an illusion. Malcolm Gladwell's touched on this, and there's a growing body of research that really backs this up. So, in this deep dive, we're going to unpack why our ability to read people isn't as reliable as we assume. And we'll look at the, frankly, pretty significant implications this has for our work relationships, for workplace dynamics overall. For a long time, we've kind of relied on this idea of universal emotional expressions. But that's exactly what the newer research is really starting to challenge.
It really is. For decades, it was almost taken as fact, wasn't it? A smile means happy, a frown means sad, crossed arms, well, that's defensive. And we use these cues constantly in the office trying to figure out if a colleague liked an idea or was just, having a bad day.
Right. And this is where things get, well, a lot more complicated.
Right.
Paul Ekman's early work on universal facial expressions, it was groundbreaking for its time, absolutely. But it's come under more and more scrutiny lately. New research is suggesting the link between the face we show and what we actually feel inside. It's much more nuanced, much more variable than we thought.
Precisely. There was one key study published in psychological science in the public interest, I believe.
Yep.
And it found that people's ability to accurately read emotions just from facial expressions, it was way less reliable than everyone assumed. Especially, and this is key when you look across different cultures, it sort of pulls the rug out from under those gut feelings we have.
Yeah, it really does. So, okay, think about presenting a new project idea. If someone on your team isn't smiling, you might instantly think, oh, they hate it, or they're not engaged. And that misjudgment, it can cause unnecessary tension, right? Or make you second guess yourself.
Absolutely.
But as this research shows, that person might just be concentrating really hard. Or maybe, a neutral face is just their default professional look. The impact day to day when we get this wrong, it's actually quite profound.
And that takes us to, well, an even deeper level of complexity. Cultural differences. Especially now, workplaces are so globalized. What seems like a clear signal in one culture might mean something completely different, even opposite, in another. It's not just a minor tweak in meaning. Sometimes it's a total flip.
It's a huge blind spot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially if you're managing diverse teams. Take eye contact. In many Western cultures, like here, direct eye contact usually signals attention, respect.
Right. Standard practice.
But in some East Asian cultures, holding that direct gaze, especially with a superior, could actually come across as aggressive or disrespectful even.
Or smiling. That's another great example.
Yeah.
In the U.S., it's often seen as just basic friendliness, almost required in service or many professional jobs. But say, in some Russian contexts, smiling broadly at strangers, or maybe in a very formal professional setting, that might seem insincere, maybe even inappropriate.
Wow. It really highlights how much our cultural background shapes these really fundamental things, like how we connect or try to.
And these differences, they have real, tangible consequences. It's not just about awkward moments. Misinterpretations based on these different cultural norms for expressing emotion, they can lead to genuine misunderstandings. They can damage working relationships,
Yeah, I can see that.
hurt productivity, definitely, and even lead to unfair performance reviews if a manager is misreading, say, quietness as disinterest, when it's actually a cultural norm for showing respect or concentration. You know the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. It kind of falls short here.
Yeah.
The research pushes us more towards a platinum rule, understanding and adapting to how they express and interpret things, especially across cultures.
So this illusion, it's not just about misreading a facial expression here or there. It seems to be rooted in something deeper about how human emotion works, especially maybe in the workplace. Let's peel that back a bit more. This misalignment between what we feel inside and what we show outside.
Exactly. We all have this ability, it's innate really, to regulate and control how we show our emotions. And that's crucial, right, for social harmony, for keeping things professional.
Sure, you can't just wear every feeling on your sleeve at work.
Right. But that variability creates a barrier. It makes it harder for others to accurately guess what's really going on inside. That's where the complexity really hits home.
And this gap between feeling and showing, it often gets wider because of what social scientists call display rules. Those unwritten rules, the sort of silent agreements we have in a workplace about which emotions are okay to show and when and how much.
The professional mask, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, think about someone who just found out they didn't get a promotion they really wanted internally. They might be absolutely crushed, disappointed, maybe angry, feeling betrayed even.
Totally understandable.
But those display rules, the professional expectation, pressures them to suppress all that. So they put on a brave face, look composed, maybe even congratulate the person who got it, and their colleagues might think, wow, they're taking that incredibly well. They completely miss the internal struggle.
It's exactly these display rules and how we manage them that are shaped by so many things. First, it's just professionalism itself. There's often pressure to hide strong emotions, especially negative ones,
Yeah.
right? To seem rational, level-headed.
Definitely. Got to keep your cool.
Then you have power dynamics. Think about hierarchies in organizations.
Right.
Subordinates might feel they have to show positive emotions toward their bosses, enthusiasm or agreement, even if they don't really feel it.
Personal history must play a part too, right?
Oh, hugely. If you grew up in a family where showing anger, for instance, wasn't okay, you might find it really hard to express frustration at work, even when it's completely justified. It just doesn't come naturally.
And personality. An introvert might feel really excited about a project win, but process it internally, appearing quite reserved. Whereas an extrovert might be much more outwardly expressive, more obviously celebrating. But inside, they could be feeling the exact same level of joy.
That's a great point. Same feeling, very different expression. And of course, culture, as we've already touched on, that's always there, filtering how emotions are shown and how they're read.
It seems like a constant factor, and we shouldn't forget mental health either. Things like depression or anxiety, they can fundamentally change how someone experiences and expresses emotions, often in ways that aren't obvious at all to colleagues, adding yet another layer of potential misunderstanding.
And if we zoom out again, the wider impact of all this emotional complexity, these potential misreadings, on workplace relationships is just huge. Misinterpreting someone's emotional state can set off this chain reaction of misunderstandings.
Oh, so?
Well, a manager might see an employee's quietness, maybe misread it as lack of enthusiasm, like we said, and then, perhaps unconsciously, give them fewer challenging assignments. That could literally stall their career growth.
Wow, okay.
Conversely, someone who's naturally more expressive might get unfairly labeled as unprofessional or maybe too emotional, even if their work is top-notch. And think about the effort involved, constantly managing your real feelings to fit those professional expectations. Sociologists call that emotional labor.
Right, I've heard that term.
It's exhausting. It takes a real toll. It could lead to chronic stress, burnout, lower job satisfaction, and even impact mental health over time.
And this tendency to misinterpret, it can unfortunately slide into something even more problematic at work. Emotional stereotyping, which is basically making these broad, often unconscious generalizations about how whole groups of people express emotions based on gender, age, culture, maybe even their job title.
Exactly. And we see this all the time. Think about gender stereotypes. There's that persistent, unfair stereotype that women are just more emotional in the workplace.
Right.
So a woman raises a valid concern, maybe with some passion, and it gets dismissed as just an emotional reaction. But a man expresses a similar concern, maybe with the same intensity. He's seen as assertive, passionate, committed.
That's a classic double standard. What about age stereotypes?
Yeah, those exist too. Younger employees, for example, might get stereotyped as being overly enthusiastic, maybe a bit naive. So their genuine excitement about a new idea or maybe a different way of doing things gets kind of patted on the head, dismissed as youthful exuberance rather than taken seriously.
And cultural stereotypes, we touched on this, but they can be incredibly damaging too.
Absolutely. Assuming, for instance, that everyone from certain Asian cultures is always going to be reserved or indirect, that leads you to completely misread their engagement. You might think a colleague isn't interested or doesn't have opinions on a project.
When really they might be deeply engaged, but showing it differently. Or maybe showing respect through quiet listening.
Precisely. Or maybe they have concerns but are hesitant to voice them directly due to cultural norms around hierarchy or confrontation.
The consequences just ripple outwards, don't they?
They really do. These stereotypes affect hiring, promotions, who gets assigned to what team, just daily interactions. When people feel stereotyped, they often disengage. Why bother sharing ideas if you think you'll just be pigeonholed? Some might even leave. Ultimately, relying on these stereotypes stops us from seeing our colleagues as individuals. It hinders building real trust and collaborating effectively.
So the path forward there seems to be about challenging our own assumptions, our biases, approaching people as individuals.
Exactly. Seeking to understand, not just assume based on a group label.
Okay, so we've talked about internal feelings versus external expressions, culture, display rules, stereotypes. What else influences how we read or misread emotions?
Well, another huge factor, and one that's surprisingly easy to overlook, is context.
Hmm.
Just the situation itself. Situational factors heavily influence both how we express emotions and how others interpret them.
Right. Let's go back to that colleague who seems unusually subdued in a meeting, the one who's normally cheerful. Without context, you might jump to, oh, they're upset with me, or they hate this project.
Easy trap to fall into.
But what could the context be? Well, maybe their workload is crushing right now. Maybe something's going on at home.
Could be. Or maybe it's the meeting dynamics. Maybe they feel someone else is dominating the conversation.
Or maybe it's about a previous interaction they had that morning. Or maybe they just didn't sleep well or feel a cold coming on.
Exactly. All these contextual pieces are vital. They paint the background against which the emotion or lack thereof is displayed. Ignoring context is like trying to read a single word torn out of a book.
And context becomes even more critical in diverse multicultural workplaces, right?
Absolutely essential. A behavior, a way of expressing something that seems off or even inappropriate in one cultural context might be perfectly normal, even expected, in another. Without understanding that context, misinterpretation is almost guaranteed.
Okay, so given all this complexity, the illusion of transparency, cultural variations, display rules, stereotypes, the importance of context, where do we go from here? How can we build more empathetic, more effective workplaces?
Well, for organizations, there are definitely concrete steps. Fostering cultural awareness is huge, providing real training on cross-cultural communication, not just ticking a box.
That makes sense. What else?
Encouraging employees at all levels to just pause, to suspend judgment when they think they're reading an emotion. And instead of guessing, actually seek clarification if they're unsure. Ask open-ended questions, like, how are you feeling about this project?
Yeah.
Rather than assuming you know.
So less mind reading, more actual communication.
Precisely. And workplace cultures themselves need to evolve. We need to create environments where it's okay to show a wider range of emotions appropriately. That reduces the burden of constant emotional labor, that draining self-regulation we talked about.
Yeah, lowering the need for that professional mask all the time.
Exactly. And training in emotional intelligence, real EI training, can help everyone, managers, team members, look beyond just the surface expression. It helps people consider the broader context, the individual differences, moving past those often flawed first impressions.
And maybe fostering more open communication channels.
Absolutely key. Things like regular psychologically safe check-ins, where people feel they can actually express how they're truly feeling about work situations without fear of judgment or negative consequences. That builds trust, prevents misunderstandings before they escalate, and just makes for much healthier team dynamics.
Okay, so wrapping this up. The main takeaway from this deep dive seems to be this. Recognizing that our supposed ability to perfectly read emotions, this idea of emotional transparency, is largely an illusion. Acknowledging that is really the first crucial step towards building better connections at work. The real deep dive here isn't about trying to become better mind readers.
No.
It's maybe more about humbling ourselves a bit, questioning our own confidence in those gut reads.
That's a great way to put it. And the payoff for doing that is potentially huge. When we have that awareness, it leads to workplaces that are more empathetic, more supportive, and ultimately more productive too. It creates spaces where genuine connection is possible, where misunderstandings are less frequent, leading to more inclusive and effective ways of working together.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over. The next time you find yourself making that instant judgment, reading a colleague's mood or reaction, just pause. How might you apply what we've talked about today? Instead of assuming, what specific context could you consider? What open-ended question could you ask? What could change, even in small ways, in your own work environment if you approached colleagues with this renewed sense of empathy, this open-mindedness, and a real willingness to communicate openly, rather than just relying on those often misleading emotional cues?